lion. So suddenly this last beast that he describes first as a little horn that's boasting and blasphemous, and it rises up and it displaces the other horns and takes over and becomes this authority. It starts off as a confederation of nations, but then it becomes really brought down to one individual who's calling all the shots. And then he said he was different in the fact that he looked like a leopard, he looked like a lion, he looked like a bear. In other words, it's almost like a composite of all the other kingdoms that have come together. So if you try to look at it from a historical point of view, it's essentially he's saying in the end of time, there's this final empire that will rise up and rule over the world, and it will draw to it all of the characteristics, good and bad, of every empire in the history of the world. Now, I've often taught that the Antichrist spirit, as we'll see, is still in the world. It's been there since Adam and Eve were deceived and Satan took over the governance of men. But what's really interesting is that they all had their strengths and weaknesses. But think about this final ruler is a composite of all the worst characteristics of every despotic, totalitarian autocrat that's ever reigned. I mean, he's like Nimrod, combined with Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar and Napoleon and Hitler and Stalin. I mean, you're getting all of the worst psychopathic personalities are being compressed into this one person.
Damn, as we go it's going to be that bad, dog.
Just as Satan gave power to each one of those to rise to their points of authority, he gives all of his authority and all of his power to this last world leader. That's the direction. You might reflect for a moment what it would be like to be ruled by such a personality. Well, the dragon, or Satan, it goes on and says, gave the beast his power, his throne, and great authority. And it says the whole world was astonished and followed the beast. And men worshiped the dragon, which is Satan, because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? Now, later on to the equation is added the false prophet, and these three make up the demonic trinity. Satan seeks to fill the role of God the Father. The Antichrist tries to play the role of the Messiah, the Son of God, and the false prophet becomes a replacement for the Holy Spirit. And this becomes the evil trinity, where essentially they seek to build a whole new false religion to displace all of the religions, including Christianity. It goes on to say the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemy, and to exercise his authority for 42 months or 3.5 years. So if you recall, we've been talking about the chronology of the tribulation. First 3.5 years, the Antichrist comes to power and everybody thinks he's incredible, tremendous, wonderful. And then in the middle, he reveals who he is, and that becomes the beginning of the end. The clock of his own desolation and destruction begins to run through the last 3.5 years. It says he opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place. In other words, you don't want to go to heaven. That's not a fun place to be. And those who live in heaven, and he was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. And all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life. But again, in the first
gotta get in that book, you guys. You gotta get in the book of life. Do what's right here on earth.
With this new government, this new economy, this new religious and spiritual system, but most important, they're going to be enamored by this incredibly dynamic leader. And I think that's something that's a little hard for us to grasp, because in our age of being able to get close and personal with many people who are in public profile, we see them warts and all. The only people that don't see the warts are people who refuse to see them, but otherwise they're pretty obvious. And, you know, even though I don't think this would happen.
You gotta get right with Christ fully.
Sometimes you can have to have the media lie about someone and make you think that it's different than what it is. When anybody with, well, anyway, I'm going too far. You can't help but see the obvious. You know what I mean? It becomes obvious, and yet think about a world where all the
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
I feel like 2026 is even more of a big year in foreign affairs.
No question, because the United States is undoing its own global order and is in the midst of what we call a political revolution.
It is happening. I think it's not a matter of whether we're going to take de facto control of Greenland. It's how and when. The leaders of both Greenland and Denmark traveling all the way to the White House to meet with Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio today. And as expected, their leaders are digging in their heels.
We had what I will describe as a frank but also constructive discussion. We also agreed to disagree. And therefore we will, however, continue to talk. The big difference is whether that must lead to a situation where
Trump trying to go over there and take over them people's seat.
And that is absolutely not necessary. I mean,
the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America sounds benign, hardly like a policy that critics call NAFTA on steroids. It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people. Political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
Yet it was agreed to by Mexico's President Fox, Canada's Prime Minister Martin, and President Bush in 2005. Administration officials counter their critics by saying everything about SPP is on the White House website. And they say the partnership is not a treaty, but more of an outline of priorities between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Still, some wonder why there haven't been public discussions about the goals being pursued.
This SPP includes, for instance, a committee that is sitting down to harmonize our meat inspection and food safety. So how far away from a trade agreement can your dining room table and what you feed your kids be?
Other parts of the agreement mention border security as an issue, which include all of North America. In fact, the name of the agreement is not Security and Prosperity of the United States, but of North America.
When we elect officials, we expect them to act on our behalf. When we get involved in cooperative frameworks with other countries for joint regulation of fisheries or rail transportation or the skies, we're basically sharing our sovereignty with that government and outsourcing some of what we give our elected officials.
As disturbing as some find SPP, there is legislation in the House introduced by Florida's Katherine Harris that closely resembles the goals of the partnership. Included in that bill is a section which calls for the securing of Mexico's southern border by the United States and Canada. Lou, that's not the border with the United States. That's the border they share with Belize and Guatemala.
The idea that the White House would respond that this is on their website, this involves intricate workings amongst the Commerce Department of this country and Canada and Mexico's, of course, a regional prosperity and security program. This is absolute ignorance. And the fact that we reported this, we should point out, when it was signed. But as we watch this thing progress, these working groups are continuing, they're intensifying. What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I pray that I'm right when I said yes, that this is beyond belief. Bill Tucker, thank you very much. It brings us to the subject of our poll tonight.
Got to be more careful, y'all. It's on its way. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
So that we are the shining city on the hill again.
I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Davos, we know there's the big housing speech. What else can we anticipate?
There's also going to be some look at the new world order that President Trump is creating. And, a lot of countries that were, whining about tariffs 6 months ago and saying that President Trump was going to harm their economies had pretty good years. And I think it's in part because people recognize that President Trump has made it so that we are the shining city on the hill again. We are the engine of global economic growth because the U.S. is really that strong again.
At its core, final word, Europe was born as a project of peace. And Canada, over the years, over the decades, has served alongside European allies in pursuit of that peace. It's that, in those circumstances, from Vimy to Juneau, that the world came to know the value of our strength. But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect,
are y'all ready? Are you guys
things,
prepared? I need my 10-12ers to be on deck, standing on business.
In these ways, the world knows the
these
strength
folks ain't even playing.
of our values. And this partnership, which is in defense and security and economics, really builds those strengths in both our jurisdictions and lives up to our values.
Yesterday, when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was this partnership, Canada and China, this new partnership sets us up well for the new world order. What did you mean by that? What is the new world order?
Well, it's a great question, Brian, because I think the world is still determining what that order is going to be. And let's be clear what we're talking about first and foremost, which is what is going to govern global trade? What is the role of the WTO going to be? How important are bilateral deals such as the one we're developing, plurilateral deals, if I can use that term, Trans-Pacific Partnership, potential linkages between Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU? Where is financial regulation, payment system regulation going to fit into that? All of these aspects, I mean, use fancy words like the architecture, the multilateral system that has been developing these is being eroded, to use a polite term, undercut, use another term. So the question is, what gets built in that place? How much of a patchwork is it? How much is it just on a bilateral basis? Or where do like-minded countries in certain areas? So like-minded countries, just to be clear, doesn't mean you agree on everything. Aspects, for example, on digital trade or agricultural trade, climate finance as another area, to move into areas of geostrategy, geosecurity. You will have different coalitions that are formed. So what this partnership does is in areas, for example, of clean energy, conventional energy, agriculture, as we were just talking about, and financial services, which we've talked less about, but the evolution of the global financial system, the role of the renminbi over time, the evolution of cross-border payments. I know it all sounds very dry, except for your organization, which I think
I'm almost done. I just wanted to put my 10-12ers up on this new world order they steady hollering about.
How the system's going to work. And look, the expectation is that rather than these being developed necessarily through the IMF, WTO, and other multilateral organizations. It is going to be coalitions that develop them not for the world, but for subsectors of the world.
Canada and Mexico do well, but the problem is we don't need
Oh,
them running.
Trump.
You know, we don't need cars made in Canada. We don't need cars made in Mexico. We want to make them here. And that's what's happening. Everybody's moving here. From Canada, they're coming here.
All right, guys, this is American Urgent Care.
Only here in the U.S., you guys.
And that's what's happening. Everybody's moving here. From Canada, they're coming here.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is in China on a historic 4-day visit, the first by a Canadian leader in nearly a decade, seeking to repair strained ties and reshape Canada's global trade strategy amid growing tensions with the United States. Arriving in Beijing, Carney declared that a new strategic partnership between Canada and China could position both countries for what he called a new world order, arguing that the global system has fundamentally changed since Canada's last high-level visit.
Chairman Zhao Leji, for receiving me, my ministers, and our delegation. This is indeed a very important meeting and the most auspicious start to the new year and to a new era of relations between Canada and China. We're heartened by the leadership of President Xi Jinping and the speed with which our relationship has progressed in recent months. This sets the stage for these important discussions on a wide range of issues where we can be strategic partners, from energy to agriculture, to people ties, to multilateralism, to issues on security. And we believe that the spirit and the substance of these discussions and these agreements will provide great benefit to each of our peoples, but also provide an example to the world of cooperation amidst a time globally of division and disorder.
That remark sparked backlash at home. Conservative MP Blaine Calkins blasted Carney for discussing a new world order with Beijing, accusing the government of cozying up to an authoritarian regime.
Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new
world order. They're coming, you guys. Get ready. Stay prayed up. I love you guys so much.
That the world is still defining
Until we
its
meet
future
again, you
order
guys.
as traditional multilateral systems erode. He suggested that smaller
These
coalitions
folks
of
out here
like-minded
twisted,
countries
y'all.
may
They hollering about the
increasingly
new world
replace
order.
institutions like the
Are you
IMF
ready? Are you ready? Are
and
you ready?
WTO.
I know that you're talking about China offering stability.
Hollering about the new world order, y'all. Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready?
Human rights.
Yes.
Do you got your canned goods? Do you got your cases of water?
Calculations? Are these things that Canada just can't afford to think about because we've got to diversify our markets?
No, we fundamentally stand up for human rights. We stand up for democracy, territorial integrity, rights to self-determination. We take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. That means the following. We do engage with countries. We calibrate that engagement depending on our values and our interests. So that engagement is more narrow when there are those issues. We also have, if you will, a sort of value-based realism to the approach. In other words, we will engage on those issues. We'll engage with coalitions on those issues because that has more influence.
Setting posts without mixing. Whether you are building a fence, setting a mailbox, or even a basketball goal, the best way to make sure your posts will stay sturdy and true for years is to set them in Quikrete concrete mix. The quickest and easiest way to set your post is to use Quikrete fast setting concrete. Because there is no mixing, you simply pour it into the hole dry, then add water. When digging your post hole, it is important that the diameter of the hole be 3 times the width of the post. So the hole for a 4-inch wood post should be about 12 inches wide. The depth of your hole should be
truly autonomous nuclear deterrence capability. This is an unprecedented force in the world that is ours. Be proud of this. Be convinced that you hold in your hands everything you need to succeed, to keep our country independent against all the risks that are now emerging.
Emmanuel Macron was spotted with a red eye, instantly triggering a storm of rumors about what could have happened with the French president. Was he beaten up? Was he injured? Or was he just exhausted? Macron said his eye condition was harmless, but it was too late. The internet explodes by then. Some media reports even joked about yet another altercation with his wife Brigitte, resurfacing past viral moments with his wife that once embarrassed the Élysée Palace. Remember, a video captured Macron and his wife indulging in an awkward interaction as their plane landed in Hanoi, Vietnam last year. The incident made headlines across the globe, bringing embarrassment to the French president. The video goes like this. As the airplane doors opened, Brigitte was seen pushing Macron's face. Once the president realizes they're being filmed, he steps away from her and waves at the cameras. Now, let's go away from the rumors to the boiling topic. This time, however, the red eye is not the story. The Arctic is. Macron's tone was hardened. With his red eye, Macron stares down a brewing Arctic crisis over Greenland and Donald Trump openly pushing for U.S. control of the strategic island. He sends 15 additional troops to Greenland to defend it from Donald Trump's possible invasion move.
This is an unbelievable deal. Anyone on the East Coast, Brian?
Damn, I ain't know they were doing it like that. Trump done send the people over there.
The Chinese have built more icebreakers in 1 year than the United States has built in the history of the country. They're not building those icebreakers for fun. They're building them in order to be able to gain control of the Arctic. And the president knows that. And look, this is public knowledge. And so if you're on the East Coast, you want a stronger presence in Greenland.
Denmark has warned of a fundamental disagreement following a meeting with the White House between U.S., Danish, and Greenlandic officials.
Come on,
Foreign
brother.
Minister Lars
Okay, you guys, I love you.
Rasmussen said the talks
Have a
with
blessed
Vice
day.
President
See you
J.D.
soon.
Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio showed potentially intractable differences over the political future of Greenland. After the meeting, Donald Trump reiterated his desire to acquire the Arctic island. Meanwhile, Denmark says it's beefing up military drills and deployment in defense of Greenland in conjunction with NATO allies, France, Sweden, Germany, and Norway.